Hey folks, Tony Morris here. Welcome to English 5521, Writing for Publication. Um, I'm sure most of you signed up to this course because you were looking for a way to mm, sharpen your skills and knowledge about, well, once I get my creative writing degree, what am I going to do with it in the sense of can I make a living? Can I make some extra cash on the side? What kind of jobs do creative writers do? That's what this course is about, really, is to give you some underpinning and some ideas uh, and some good lessons about what you want to look for when it comes to making a career as a creative writer. Uh, and when I say that, I mean making a living, making some money, hopefully. Uh, the course has two textbooks that we are primarily going to use. The one is really primary. It's called The Business of Being a Writer by, Jane Freeman. She herself has an MFA in creative writing many years ago. She got that and herself wanted to, do what we all want to do, which is take our wonderful works of poetry, creative nonfiction, and fiction and get it out there in the public realm so people could enjoy that stuff. As she went into the world, though, she realized that she wasn't given much information about exactly how one goes about doing that. And she spent many years kind of developing her own niche in the business, writing for journals, writing for industry, writing her creative, keeping up with her creative side, but really kind of pulling together a bunch of strands of different uh, avenues of uh, avenues of funding so that she could afford to be a writer and make a living at writing. I think it's a great book. Not it's simply written, but it gives you all the pertinent information that you are going to need to get a good start on making a career as a writer. So the other book is The Writer's Market, which is a big fat book. Hold on. Here it is. It's called The Writer's Market. It's a big fat book. It's the book that a lot of writers use to find out the information about the publishers, especially publishers of books and agents too. So this has a listing of pretty much all the agents that are out there and information on how to contact them, general information on what they're looking for, what kind of work they're looking for, what genre, the page numbers, the areas of interest and topics um, that they are going to be primarily pushing out to the publishers that they work with. So it's a real valuable tool to have. I use this and sent out my query letter for my first novel to about 50 agents, and got a good agent after I don't know about the 20th one that came back. It's a good tool, and we'll talk about using this during the course too. Um, so if you've not been online before working in Folio, well, then there's a couple things that you might want to know. It's not a big deal. It's not a difficult platform to kind of get a hold of. But across the top of the content links, you're going to see things like content, grades, uh, um, edit course, grades, assessment, communication, and underneath each one of these drop down, there's a drop down box that comes up that you'll be able to navigate through what you're looking for. But primarily, if you start at content, once you open up the platform, then you're going to see a list down the left-hand side of kind of the course structure, starting with overview at the top, which is kind of a written introduction, and then there's the Georgia Southern attendance verification that you're going to need to make sure you do, online verification. It's right there at the top. And then below that, there's a course syllabus. And then each week is labeled. Then after that, week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. Underneath each week, you'll be able to click a up down arrow on the side, and it'll kind of open up and give you the assignments that are due that week. If you click on, for example, week 1, you're going to open up and just get a general description of what we're covering on week 1. So this week, for example, we're going to be doing a course overview, a brief review of the syllabus. I want you to make some introductions to each other. That will be an assignment. And talk a little about the realities of earning a living, kind of the mindset for a sustainable career. Then I'll list the readings that you'll be assigned for the week, the discussion for the week. Each week you're going to have a discussion prompt that you're going to need to address, and then there'll be an exercise and an assignment. So that's going to be pretty much every week the same thing as far as those general areas. So let's just maybe talk a little bit about the syllabus. This is a 5,000 level course. My assumption is that most of you have already seen a lot of these syllabi in other courses. They're fairly commonly formatted, so I'm not going to go through each and every detail of the syllabus. I do have a couple of quotes at the beginning of the syllabus here that I think are pretty cool. The first one's from Albert Camus. The only really committed artist is he who, without refusing to take part in the combat, at least refuses to join in the regular armies and remains a freelance. Yes, freelance writing. Now we're going to be talking a lot about that. The life of a professional writer, this is from Will Self, saying that it's like that of any freelance, whether she be a plumber or a podiatrist, is predicated on willpower. Whether it's without there is simply enough, there wouldn't be any remuneration, period. So in other words, if you don't have the will, then you're never going to get any money from it anyhow. So it really takes a lot of kind of, will to say, I'm going to be an independent writer and I'm going to make a living and I'm going to do whatever I have to do that. Kind of like, I don't know, musicians are very much the same too. I was a amateur musician briefly in my younger years, and you can commit years and years to the life of the musician before you even get noticed. But along the way, you can make money slowly but surely, building up clientele, and that's the same with a writer and many other artists too. So. Finally, we have from Alan Savory, if you dig deep and keep peeling the onion, artists and freelance writers are the leaders in society, the people who start to get new ideas out. I really like that one, especially because I think there's much more to be said for this idea of producing work that comes out on a fairly semi-regular basis. And as a freelance writer, you can kind of start picking and choosing the areas of interest that you would like to write about to a certain extent. And the longer you are in the gig, the longer you're doing it, the more connections you make, the more social connections you make and professional connections you make, you're going to be able to get your work out to more and more people and larger audiences. So those are just some nice quotes that I have at the opening of the syllabus. Basically, what you're going to be, the goals for this course is for you to explore the craft of practical freelance and publication and its many variations. We're going to kind of critically read the assigned essays and look at the business and scope of the profession kind of historically and contemporaneously. We'll read to critique the writing of our peers also and find ways to improve our own writing. As students of the craft, we'll compose several pieces of writing and use those to kind of turn into professional copy for traditional and online magazines and newspapers and publishers. So that's the general overall goal of this class. I'm going to have you read through a lot of the fine print, things like, you're expected to be professional in the class, you're expected to turn in your work on time, and if you don't, then you're not going to get credit for it. You need to make sure that you submit your attendance verification, or you will not in week one, or you're not going to be counted in the class. Um, Other areas might be things like, the course syllabus. It can change depending on what happens. If there's inclement weather that prevents us from working together, to be able to get to our online courses, then there might be a need to change that schedule around a little bit. But that rarely happens. You are expected to participate in the course. This course is highly dependent on all the students participating actively in the course, and that means online in the discussions, really using those discussion assignments as a way to create a conversation in the classroom between you and your fellow classmates, and with me also. So each week you're going to kind of have some pre-recorded videos and lectures, 15 to 30 minutes. They'll summarize kind of chapter concepts and industry updates. You're going to have required readings for the textbook and discussions, exercises, and assignments. There's going to be a couple peer review workshops on selected works. All the assignments need to be submitted electronically. Feedback, I try to get feedback on assignments within a week. The grading is basically, you're going to have a portfolio that's going to be due at the end. So adding everything all up together, discussion is going to be worth 150 points, exercises 160 points, assignments 140 points, and your final portfolio is 100 points. So I grade on a scale of 90% to 100% is an A, 80 to 89% is a B, and so on and so forth. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's I do have a kind of a schedule listed there that you can kind of get an idea of what we're going to be going through, a very overall idea of that each week. I do want to remind people to, don't cheat in the class, no plagiarism, don't use AI as a tool to create your own works. Research in AI and such, of course, it's a very convenient tool for that. And I don't have any problem with that, but and I wish I didn't have to say this to creative writers, but the value of the creative writer for the future is actually your own creative ideas and concepts, as opposed to giving those creative ideas and concepts to the large language models, such that at some future point they will be writing like you and taking over everything you're doing, and then you won't have a job. So, the basic idea is that the more you can put your own imprint, your own, it's just like a fingerprint. Our writing voices are very distinctive, and so the more distinctive and imaginative and creative we can be in coming up with approaches to writing whatever those assignments and products are, the better for us. So that's all I'm going to cover in the syllabus. So maybe we can just talk for a minute, though, about this idea of what we're going to do in this course in the kind of overall picture. The realities of learning to live as a writer, and what kind of mindset you're going to have for a sustainable career. So I guess I'm going to start by saying that, when I got into the world of writing, I really didn't know much about how that was going to happen at all. I knew that I loved writing poems. That's what I started out. That was my major area of writing, was poetry. But I'd studied literature. Actually, my bachelor's degree, my master's degree, and my PhD are all three English degrees, and I studied a lot of literature. That was I think maybe the most important aspects of helping me to develop a mindset about writing and writers, and about coming into a field that had been historically going on for thousands of years. this field of writing and creative writing, and kind of finding that I had a certain place in that historical arc. Um, and so, uh, and so, as I slowly found out about getting published, it started out with learning about magazines. And even before that, really, I mean, I was working on the student newspaper, and I got a job as a freelance writer for the Charlotte Observer. And this was when I was still in my second year, I guess, of college. I got that side job with the Charlotte Observer. So learning how to write strong, active verb, concrete noun filled uh, uh, sentences that were uh, really compressed down such that you can get the information to your reader quickly in a newspaper article. That really kind of set me up for understanding this idea of the audience has a particular need that I have to fill. And so how can I take the knowledge that I have and the ideas that I have and shape them in such a way that I can satisfy the audience's need, because that ultimately is how I'm going to make a living. So I had that in my background a little bit. I thought maybe I was going to be a journalist. But as I went through my college career, I again was majoring in English and reading a lot of literature. And I was finishing up in my senior year. I was finishing up with my degree. Had a job working at NBC by this time. By the way, I was writing for a medical news desk at NBC, an internship, and then I was offered a job. But I also discovered poetry then. I went to a poetry reading. I was a little skeptical. I didn't quite know what to expect at this poetry reading, but I was struck when I got there and heard the poems being read of how they seemed to be saying something about contemporary life that I could relate to, and I thought maybe I could do that. And so I went home that night and I wrote several poems before I went to sleep. It was maybe around midnight or 1 o'clock, and I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm thinking to myself, so how the hell does a poet make a living? Because to be honest with you, I was a kind of a non-traditional student, so I was already married. I had a 2-year-old child. I had responsibilities, had house payments and such, and so I really did want to be able to make some money, and that was a little bit concerning to me. But I thought, what the heck, I'll pursue this a little bit, and I went into my master's program and uh, did both a English exam and also a thesis for my master's degree, which was a collection of poems, and that got me into Florida State, where I then pursued my PhD. Here's the deal, though. I didn't. I mean, I didn't really think that I was going to become a professor of creative writing. Not at that point, anyhow. I knew it was an option. I knew that it was out there, but I also knew, and this was in 2000, 2002, I also knew that the market was extremely, extremely competitive, and that unless I had some huge awards behind me, which I had a couple of awards, regional awards and such for my poetry, but I knew that getting a job was going to be tough in academia. So I planned on maybe doing some freelance work, and really didn't know what I was going to do. But I was lucky enough to get after I graduated, I got a 2-year visiting professorship as an assistant professor at Gardner-Webb University, and then 2 years after that, when that ended, I got a 2-year visiting professorship at Atlantic State University, which is now Georgia Southern at the Armstrong campus. I went down there, and then they hired me permanently as a tenured professor, and started out teaching a lot of journalism, not creative writing, and technical writing classes and business writing classes. I was about 5 years there before I really started teaching the creative writing classes. And then I've been teaching creative writing since then, since about 2010. My point of telling you that is that I was willing to do what it took to get to the point where I could be in the field where I could focus on creative writing. And it took some time, and it took a lot of effort, it took some patience, and there are some scary times in there when I didn't know what I was going to do, uh, but I really believed in my work. Other people seemed to believe in my work, and that was really important. It was really important that I had some professors that I valued, looked up to their work ethic, and they seemed to think that my work was worthy of publication and getting it out there. So that, the bottom line is this: is that once you finish up your bachelor's degree in creative writing, you have some options. You can go on to graduate school and get a master's degree, and master's degrees are pretty cool in the sense that you're only spending about 2 more years of your life to get that degree. If you can get it and get it paid for, that's really the only way that I would do it. In other words, most of the schools out there are going to offer tuition waivers or some kind of remuneration for tuition if they think your work is worthy of that. So that's really the best way of doing it, getting the master's degree, I mean. And the advantage of doing that is it gives you a couple more years to really focus in on your writing and get to know some more people, get some more contacts, be able to develop maybe a larger social network, because that's going to be very important, is that network. The people you know and the contacts you make over time are going to be the same people that will help you to move ahead as your career grows. So, that's the major advantage of it. And again, the fact that it's only 2 more years of your life. Moving on into the PhD, even an MFA, is a little bit different, because now you're putting yourself in a situation where you're 3, 4 years up to 7 or 8 more years of school, and the debt's going to pile up one way or another, even if you get some scholarships to help out. Bills, other life expenses are going to come in. So that's a really huge commitment, and the market out there for creative writing professors is devastatingly hard. We're hiring someone now for our department, and there were over 140, 150 applicants for this one position, and that's at Georgia Southern, which is not considered necessarily up there with those the high Ivy League schools, or even some of the top 10 creative writing schools in America. So that might give you some idea of the kind of competition you'll be up against. And these people that we're looking at have already, they're coming out and coming to us with already having published often several books, and having other skills they've advanced: film, music, screenwriting, art. So it's a pretty tough market. I'm not saying you shouldn't kind of focus on that, but you should definitely consider these things very seriously. In the meantime, taking a class like this is going to give you some tools that will help you to be better prepared once you hit the world out there. There are a lot of opportunities in magazines, both online and print magazines, to get stories published. And some of them are fiction stories. Many of them are nonfiction stories, creative nonfiction stories, biographies, special interest, personal interest stories, even little side box stories that you can put together. The top 10 lists are the best of lists. So coming up with these ideas for some lists, it may not seem like a lot, and maybe you might only get paid $75 for putting something like that together, but that's just one little project that you'll want to start piecing together as you try to put your writing life in motion, right? So if you get a $75 job over here, then you get another job over here where they want you to write a 700-word story on how what is the best fishing in the Georgia coastal marshlands, and they're going to pay you $200 for that. And then you have another article over here that's about the Savannah Book Festival, kind of a review on a particular artist that's coming to the book festival, and that's going to be published online, or it's going to be published in the Savannah Morning News, and maybe they'll pay you $100 for that. And then you're going to maybe have another one that's out there, maybe a month, where they're going to say this is a 2,000-word, more in-depth story about this family who just lost their child to some particular medical issue that's in the news at the time, and it takes a little bit more research and some more interviewing, and so they're going to maybe pay you for that $1,500. So now you add those 4 or 5 jobs together, and you have a little bit of an income for that month. And then you have to do that every month, though. Every month you have to be putting ideas together. And in the meantime, you can be working on your other projects. Let's say if you have been working on a novel, and you have now put together 100,000 words, and you think it's in the condition ready to be sent to an agent, meaning after several revisions, sending it to someone that can line edit and give you some good feedback, and then revising to the point where you're so sick and tired of it that you really never want to read your own story again. That's very common for us writers. At that point, well, then you want to reach out and get an agent, and we'll talk about agenting and how to find an agent, and how to write a good query letter to get an agent, and how to write a good synopsis of your story, how to give a 2-minute pitch on your story. Things like that. We'll also talk about the small journals and the small publishers, the independent publishers that are out there, where you might be able to publish single pieces or smaller pieces. Let's say 1 or 2 poems at a time in a journal that has a good national reputation, like the Puerto Rico Review, or Southern Review, or Quantum Review. There's several really good magazines out there, many of them, and they'll publish like a short story, maybe a short story piece, or maybe you have a chapter and you think you can turn it into a short story, so you retool that chapter, turn it into a short story, you submit it to one of these magazines, and then your part of your novel gets published as a short story, or you get a short story published, or a poem, or you have a really nice creative nonfiction piece that you've been working on, and you get that published in a magazine. And what that does is it starts getting you notice out there in the world of writers. Your name starts to be out in public, and that's a huge part of, again, making those connections and doing what you need to do. But overall, I guess, and I'll finish with this, I feel like I'm just kind of going on and on, but that idea of having the will to push on and keep doing the things that are out there that you need to be doing. I mean, it's not easy to. When I first started publishing, poetry, I was sending 3 to 5 poems out to magazines almost every day, and I was getting rejections back almost every day. But that was okay, because every once in a while I'd get a hit, and I would get a publication. And so my first book came out, my first book of poems came out. The poems in the book had been published in 30 to 40 magazines before I put them together in one single collection, and then submitted it for publication. And that's what it's going to take. It's just kind of that persistence, perseverance, that strong will to do the next thing, do the work, and it'll all come together. So I hope you enjoy the class. I hope you get a lot out of it. I'm looking forward to working with you this semester. I think it's going to be a great semester. And as far as the material and the return on your investment, as far as being able to take what you know about writing and then add that to kind of some business acumen and be able to then turn that into some profit for you in addition to getting your work out there, making some money while you're doing it. Okay? So I hope you guys have a great week. If you need to get in touch with me, you can email me at tmorris@georgiasouthern.edu. At some point, we may do some kind of video conferencing, maybe towards the end of the semester, but I will be putting up one of these videos about once a week and kind of covering what we're going to be doing during the week and giving you my experience about how I've handled coming into this area and how it has helped me. So, all right, have a great week and make sure you get your work done every week on time, and it's going to be fairly straightforward and not complicated. And I think you're gonna really get a lot out of it. So, thanks again for visiting me, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.